The Boston Globe on February 23rd, 2015, ran a story about our case and how it became the very first UFO or off-world case ever in the United States to be deemed historically significant and true. And so as of 2015, our case has now been in the Great Barrington Mass Historical Society as the very first UFO case ever in the nation. And that to me speaks pretty loudly. So when you have an officer or a township or a police department that won't even take a police report because of the topic, but you have a township that is so well aware of what everybody saw, the evidence is there, the magnetic fields, the polygraph tests, the witnesses, the calls that came into the radio station, the reports to the police officer himself, the talk in the restaurant, that still is carried on 50 years later. Even the guy who bought and sold our house has a spin on it that this is the house that was the blah, blah, blah. Now our restaurant, the Village Green, is closed down. That's true. It's out of business. But they've never taken it out of town. It's boarded up and it stays there with our name on it from 1960. This was a very big historic event for Massachusetts. The school where I drew the sketches that now hang in Roswell, they never tore that down. They made that the town library. And the teachers who taught there that remember all the sketches and things that were drawn onto the chalkboard still talk about it. So how could, with all that, you can't get a local police department to at least take a police report? They told us that there was no crime committed. Now I can kind of see that, but they could still take it more seriously. Now my brother, to add to that, my brother also lived out in Brownsburg, Avon, Indiana. And he was out there during the Kokomo boom, which was kind of like the Phoenix Lights of, that area. And he saw a ball of light, an orange light, and he was following it and trying to catch it on a cell phone. And Alien Mysteries did a good story on that. And Uncovering Aliens did too, actually. But a lot of the focus was put on Avon and my brother's case when that's not really what our case is. Our case isn't about being part of a wave. Our case is so much more than that. And so we don't really talk about it that much anymore. But the good that comes from that is the fact that there was trace evidence with that. And it's still our family. And when it happened to him, and he was involved in that, his youngest child was turning 5, the same age he was when it happened to us at the farm. And now my son is a very intuitive young man who was a quarterback in high school, was in the gifted and superior range in testing in his schools, in third party, Miami Children's Hospital and everything else, and actually represented his school in a Palm Beach shootout, if you will, by your smartest kids in English, your smartest kids in math, the ones that score the highest, your gifted kids. And he represented his school for that. And he can kind of sense things. There was a time he thought I was in danger, and he was in a panic and called me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you're okay? He was in a sweat, apparently, according to his girlfriend. So he gets in his car and drives all the way to my house, an hour. And when he turned around, I live in a corner. When he circled that corner, he looked on my property, and sure enough, there was a van that hit a telephone pole upside down on my property with a person hanging out the sunroof. But he knew something was a danger to a loved one. It's not the first time he's done that. So now we're looking at the kids again, right? Because when this happened with my brother, Andrew, his youngest, was turning 5. My son, I look back now and I go, what was happening with him when he was, he was 4 and 5? And we see patterns. So now you've got my mother, which really had her first incident in 1954 while she was on vacation now. She remembers that very well. Then my brother and I, both, 5 and 7, or 6, and yeah, right around the same age. And then we have children. My son has some unbelievable abilities, and who we also found face down at 2 months old, when he wasn't strong enough to roll himself over, with blood coming out of his nose in his crib, with a rocking chair moving in the living room. My wife and I were sleeping, woke up thinking we were having the same dream, darted across the room, and there's my 2-month-old son. Couldn't move himself, with blood coming out of his nose, face down. My brother has 2 marks in his chest, identical 2 marks behind the ear, right over the thymus gland, which produces the T cells when you're young. They dry up when you're older, but your T cells are produced here. And although they dry up, it is for the immune system. And we've got scoop marks on our body. There just seems to be, in my opinion, something that was extracted from us and something that was mutually exchanged with us. Something that was extracted and something that was exchanged. And I think what is happening is we're finding that whatever it was that was taking place, there seems to be an interest in whether or not it's continuing with our offspring, with our children. Just as if you had cancer and you were treated for it, is your son or daughter going to continue the same road you did, or will it fix it? So that way they're starting to see that, yes, we have a race that we can manipulate, change, alter, and make better, and have higher testing children, more intuitive children, and that they find these lines, I believe, which is like the O negative, which I think is probably a universal platform or used for building blocks if you're going to start to manufacture, designer beings. O negative blood is the universal donor, even for people, it's the only blood our government even tracks, because it's the universal donor for war. So if it can be given to anybody, I would imagine if you were going to manipulate and design a being, you would need a universal bloodline. There you go. And we have that. And we had a lot of military bases around us, or military manufacturing facilities, and no-fly zones, and crafts up in the mountains with us. I mean, this to me has all the writing on the wall for me is that was a joint effort. We got caught in it. And that's what I think happened to our family.